if we think about how the world is evolving as far as business is concerned, and as far as the way we need to be setting up our businesses and how vastly different they need to become, we start to understand that this comfort is choking us. It's choking ourselves and our evolvements and the way our business structures are actually evolving into the future. The difference here is the difference between a complicated world and a complex one. And this is the world we come from, the 200 years of industrial revolution that was all about linear innovation. And we're moving in towards this quantum dynamic digital world that's all about disruption. There's vastly different scenarios. But let me break them down for you, because the complicated world is the world we are all very comfortable with and the world that we know very well. But it's not anything like the complex world. But let me break down the complicated world for you. The complicated world and the world we come from, and the world we come from has patterns that repeat themselves. That's why we could build 2, 3, 5-year plans, because patterns repeated themselves and we kind of knew what to expect. That's why we could use Excel spreadsheets, mathematics, and accounting to actually figure our way out of any problem we were, because we just need to extrapolate the past into the future and we were good to go. Also, this idea of a complicated world, because patterns are repeating themselves, automation becomes obvious. And when automation becomes obvious, it becomes commoditized and the price gets driven down. With many of our jobs, our degrees, and our businesses, we find a lot of commoditization happening. Why? Because everybody's got access to pretty much the same information. And lastly, and most importantly, in this world of complication, it's key for us to focus in on hyper-efficiency and economies of scale. Why? Because you're doing the same thing you did last year. You want to increase profit and drop costs. Excellent formula, has worked fantastically well for 200 years. But let's talk about the complex world that we're moving into. Because in the complex world that we're moving towards, what you have some patterns, but they don't repeat themselves. So you can't actually use accounting, Excel spreadsheets, and mathematics to work yourself out of these problems, and you also can't use automation, because there is no automation that's been created to actually solve any of these problems, because automation is great at pattern recognition, not about not having any patterns to follow. But the key difference between a complicated world and a complex one, and the foundations that change, are massive. Because in this new world that we're moving into, we need to be practicing something called economies of learning and robustness, not efficiency. And let me explain what those means. Economies of learning has two sort of ideas around it. The first one is, how do you quickly unlearn to relearn? That becomes a superpower in the future, economies of learning. How quickly can I unlearn to relearn, because that's how things are changing. The second thing, using machine learning and data points, how do we preempt what our customers want before they even know they want it? Utilizing, is God speaking to me?
No.
Mark, I can hear you on the mic. I hope you're not in the toilet. And robustness is exactly the opposite of efficiency. Robustness says, I need to express my business and products and services as widely as possible. Efficiency says, I'm only going to service one or two things and do it as efficiently as possible. Let me land this for you with an example. Do you remember when we used to travel a lot? And please God, we'll start traveling again soon. We used to get to the airport, we used to put our suitcase onto the conveyor belt, and our conveyor belt used to get our suitcase to us on the plane 99% of the time, utilizing a pattern repetition process that's highly automated and highly complicated. Have you ever seen videos of suitcases in the back of airports? I mean, it's a miracle they even get to us, but they do most of the time. And this is always based on pattern recognition, repeating it, bringing efficiencies to it, economies of scale, and all of this is really important and highly automated. So that's the conveyor belt and the luggage that you get on. That's the old world that we come from. But the world that we're moving into is not complicated, it's complex. And so as we take off and the plane gets into the air, now we're not in a complicated world anymore. Now we're in a very complex world. In other words, we have no idea what's going to happen to us when we're up in the air. We have no idea if a bird's going to fly into the engine, a pilot's going to die, a terrorist attack's going to happen, an operating system's going to go down. We have no idea. So what do? We build planes robustly. In other words, we have 4 engines when one is enough. We have 3 pilots when one is enough. We have 5 operating systems when one is enough. Why? We're built for complexity, not complications. We've built for robustness, not efficiency. The world we're moving into is much more a plane than it is a conveyor belt. And our comfort, our idea of convenience and certainty is keeping us on a conveyor belt and not moving us towards a plane.